Well, honey, come sit yourself down in that old rocking chair right there. I've got sweet tea brewing and a story that's been weighing on my heart for near about 15 years now. My name is Margaret Louise Maggie Patterson. I'm 72 years old, been living here in Savannah, Georgia most of my life. And let me tell you something. When your husband of 32 years decides to up and leave you for some young thing barely older than your own daughter, you'd think that'd be the worst of it, wouldn't you? Takes a long sip of sweet tea and adjusts her reading glasses. But what they didn't know was that this old Southern gal had something up her sleeve that would make their little love nest come crashing down like a house of cards in a Georgia thunderstorm. You see, darling, when you've been married as long as I had been, and when you've been smart enough to pay attention to every single paper that comes across your kitchen table, well, let's just say the law was on my side in ways they never saw coming. Stick around till the end, honey, and tell me what you would have done in my shoes when you found out your whole life was built on lies, but the truth was right there in black and white the whole time. Tell me what state you're watching from. I love hearing from folks all across this great country. Hit that like button if you're enjoying this story, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life tales from the heart of Georgia. Let me paint you a picture of how life was before it all went sideways. Sweetheart, picture this: a beautiful antebellum-style home on 3 acres just outside Savannah, with Spanish moss hanging from ancient oak trees and azaleas blooming pink and white every spring like God's own garden. That house had been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandmother bought it back in 1923 with money she'd saved working as a seamstress. Bobby Joe Patterson and I got married in 1975, right there under the biggest oak tree in our front yard. I was 25, fresh out of nursing school, and he was this charming carpenter who could fix anything with his hands and make me laugh till my sides hurt. We had 2 beautiful children, Sarah Beth and little Bobby Jr., and for 32 years, I thought we had the kind of marriage you read about in Southern Living magazine. Pauses to watch a cardinal land on the porch railing. Bobby Joe built us additions to that house over the years. A screened-in back porch where we'd sit on summer evenings listening to the cicadas sing. A workshop where he'd craft furniture that folks from 3 counties over would come to buy. We hosted Thanksgiving for 47 people every year, Christmas morning with presents piled high as a pine tree, and 4th of July barbecues that went on till midnight with fireflies dancing in the yard. I kept the books for his carpentry business, handled all our finances, paid every bill, filed every tax return. Bobby Joe always said, "Maggie, honey, you got the brains for numbers. I just know how to make things pretty with wood." I thought it was sweet how he trusted me with everything. I thought it meant he respected my mind. Shakes her head with a bitter laugh. What I didn't know was that all those years I was keeping us organized and financially stable, Bobby Joe was keeping secrets that would near about destroy everything I thought I knew about my own life. Now, honey, what would you have done if you'd been married that long and trusted someone completely with your heart? The first sign something was wrong came in the spring of 2007. I remember it exactly because the dogwoods were blooming and I was planning Sarah Beth's baby shower. Our first grandbaby was coming. Bobby Joe started working late more and more, taking jobs over in Pooler or down near Richmond Hill. Places that should have been day trips were turning into overnight stays. "Maggie, darling," he'd say in that smooth voice that used to make my knees weak, "this client wants the work done perfect, and you know I can't leave a job half-finished." He'd kiss my forehead and be gone for 2, sometimes 3 days at a time. I started noticing other things too. New cologne that smelled expensive. Shirts I'd never seen before mixed in with his laundry. And strangest of all, Bobby Joe had gotten real secretive about his phone. This was a man who used to answer his flip phone right in front of me, talking to clients about kitchen cabinets and front porch repairs. Suddenly, he was stepping outside every time it rang. Fidgets with her wedding ring. One evening in June, I'll never forget, it was the night before Father's Day. I decided to surprise him by bringing dinner to one of his job sites. He'd said he was working on a big kitchen renovation for some woman whose husband traveled for business. I made his favorite, fried chicken, mac and cheese, and cornbread with real butter. When I got to the address he'd given me, sweetheart, there wasn't any construction happening. It was a tidy little ranch house with a garden full of roses and a BMW in the driveway. Through the front window, I could see Bobby Joe sitting at a kitchen table with a woman who had honey blonde hair and was wearing what looked like a silk blouse. They were holding hands across the table, and she was laughing at something he'd said. I sat in my car for near about 20 minutes, just watching my husband of 32 years being different, animated, young-looking somehow, the way he used to look at me when we were first married. Voice gets quieter. I drove home and put that fried chicken in the refrigerator. When Bobby Joe came home, near midnight, I asked him how the kitchen renovation was going. He looked me right in the eye and said, "Oh, it's coming along real good, Maggie. Should be finished up by next week." That's when I knew for certain my marriage was built on lies. After that night, I became a detective in my own life. Honey, you know how we Southern women are. We might look sweet as pecan pie on the outside, but we've got steel spines when we need them. I started paying closer attention to everything. I noticed Bobby Joe had opened a new bank account, one that the statements came to a P.O. box I'd never heard of. I found the key to that box in his tool shed, hidden inside an old coffee can behind his wood stain. When I went to check it out, wearing my best church hat and most innocent smile, I found statements showing thousands of dollars being moved around. Money from our joint account. Money from his business account. Money I thought was going toward our retirement. Leans forward conspiratorially. But here's where it gets real interesting, sweetheart. I also found receipts. Jewelry store receipts for a diamond necklace I'd never seen. Restaurant receipts from places in Savannah I'd been wanting to try for years, but Bobby Joe always said were too fancy for folks like us. Hotel receipts from the historic district. Places you'd take someone you wanted to impress, not your wife of 3 decades. I hired a private investigator, a nice woman named Carol who specialized in domestic situations. Turns out her name was Crystal Manning. She was 38 years old, divorced, worked as a real estate agent, and lived in that little ranch house where I'd seen them together. She had a 16-year-old daughter, and, according to Carol's research, had been dating my husband for almost 2 years. Voice hardens. 2 years, honey. 2 years of working late and difficult clients and kitchen renovations. 2 years of coming home to me and kissing my cheek and asking what was for dinner while he was building a whole other life with another woman. But the part that near about killed me, Carol showed me pictures of them at fancy restaurants, walking hand in hand through Forsyth Park. And one that made my blood run cold, Bobby Joe helping Crystal's teenage daughter move furniture into what looked like a college dorm room. He was playing daddy to another woman's child while his own grandchild was about to be born. The night I got those pictures, I sat on our back porch till dawn, listening to the whippoorwills and trying to figure out what 32 years of marriage had actually meant. The confrontation came on a Tuesday morning in September, right after Labor Day. I'd been carrying around the knowledge of Crystal Manning for 3 months, watching my husband lie to my face every single day, and I just couldn't do it anymore. Sarah Beth had had the baby, a beautiful little girl named Emma Rose, and Bobby Joe was supposed to be over the moon about being a grandfather. Instead, he kept making excuses about why he couldn't babysit, why he couldn't come to family dinners. I waited until he was sitting at our kitchen table, drinking coffee from the mug I'd given him that said, "World's Best Husband." The irony wasn't lost on me, and I placed Carol's envelope of photographs right next to his toast and peach preserves. Voice trembles slightly. "Bobby Joe," I said, "come a Sunday morning. I think we need to talk." The look on his face when he opened that envelope, Honey, it was like watching 32 years of lies crumble all at once. His face went white as my grandmother's good china, and his hands started shaking so bad he couldn't hold his coffee cup steady. Maggie, I can explain, he started, but I held up my hand. No, sir, I said, you've done enough explaining. 2 years' worth of explaining about kitchen renovations and late nights and out-of-town jobs. What I want to know is what you plan to do about it. He tried the usual things men try when they get caught. He said it didn't mean anything. He said Crystal was just going through a hard time with her divorce, and he was helping her out as a friend. He said he loved me and only me, and this was all just a big misunderstanding. Stands up and walks to the porch railing. Then he said the words that changed everything. Maggie, honey, I think maybe we need some time apart, just to figure things out. I could move into the apartment above my workshop for a while, and we could see if maybe this marriage has just run its course. That's when I knew he wasn't planning to end things with Crystal Manning. He was planning to end things with me. But there was something they didn't count on about this American woman who'd been paying attention to every single detail of her financial life for 32 years. Here's where this story gets real interesting, sweetheart, and why I say you should always read every piece of paper that comes into your house. See, when Bobby Joe said he was moving out to figure things out, I just nodded real sweet and said, well, honey, if that's what you think is best. He packed his bags that very afternoon and moved into his workshop apartment. Within a week, he was staying at Crystal's house most nights. Within a month, he'd moved in completely, sits back down and folds her hands. But what Bobby Joe didn't remember, what he'd forgotten in all his excitement about his new life, was something that happened way back in 1987. We'd been having some financial troubles, and the bank was requiring us to refinance our mortgage. The loan officer, a sharp lady named Patricia Wells, had pulled me aside and said, Mrs. Patterson, given that this house has been in your family for generations, and given that you're the one handling all the finances, I'd strongly recommend that we put this property solely in your name. That way, if anything ever happens to your husband's business, your family home is protected. It made sense at the time. Bobby Joe's carpentry business was growing, and there was always the risk of lawsuits or business debts that could affect our personal property. So we signed the papers, and the deed to our house, our beautiful house with 3 acres and Spanish moss and 4 generations of memories, went into my name only. Margaret Louise Patterson, sole owner. Smiles for the first time in the story. Bobby Joe never paid attention to those kinds of details. He trusted me to handle the paperwork. And I did. For 20 years, I'd been the sole legal owner of everything we'd built together, and he'd completely forgotten. So when he started talking about splitting things 50-50 and working out a fair settlement, I just smiled real sweet and said, well, Bobby Joe will have to see what the lawyers say about that. The look on his face when my attorney, Miss Eleanor Braxton, a steel magnolia if there ever was one, explained that he had no legal claim to the house, the land, or any of the assets that were in my name, only, honey, I wish I could have taken a picture. What happened next was like watching dominoes fall. Sweetheart, once Bobby Joe realized he couldn't force me to sell the house or give him half of everything, his whole plan started unraveling faster than a cheap sweater. Turns out, Crystal Manning had been expecting him to come into their relationship with significant assets. She'd been planning on them buying a bigger house together, maybe starting their own business. When she found out that Bobby Joe was essentially starting over with nothing but his tools and his truck, her enthusiasm for their great love affair cooled down considerably. Chuckles softly. Miss Eleanor helped me document every penny Bobby Joe had taken from our joint accounts to spend on Crystal. Every dinner, every piece of jewelry, every hotel room. It all had to be paid back as part of our divorce settlement. And since Georgia Law doesn't look kindly on spouses who waste marital assets on extramarital affairs. The judge ordered him to pay me back with interest. But here's the part that really showed what kind of man Bobby Joe had become. When he couldn't get money out of me, he started asking our children to convince me to be reasonable. He actually had the nerve to call Sarah Beth right after little Emma Rose was born and suggest that I was being vindictive by not sharing the house with him. Voice gets firm. Our Sarah Beth, bless her heart, told him, "Daddy, Mama handled every detail of your life for 32 years. If you didn't bother to pay attention to what was in your name and what wasn't, that's on you, not her." The divorce was final 6 months later. Bobby Joe moved to Florida with Crystal. Seemed she had family down there who could help them get started. Last I heard, they broke up about 2 years after that. Apparently, when reality set in and the excitement wore off, they discovered they didn't have much in common besides sneaking around behind other people's backs. Looks out at the garden. I kept our house, our land, and our memories. I also kept my dignity, my self-respect, and my relationship with my children and grandchildren. Emma Rose is 15 now, and she loves coming to stay with her grandma Maggie in the same house where her mama grew up. And Bobby Joe, well, he learned the hard way that when you try to build a new life on lies and deception, it's got about as much foundation as a house of cards in a Georgia tornado. Rocks gently in her chair as the sun starts to set. Sitting here on this front porch 15 years later, honey, I can tell you that surviving what I survived changes a woman. Not just because of the betrayal, though Lord knows that cut deep, but because of what I learned about my own strength. For 32 years, I thought I was just being a good wife by handling our finances and keeping our life organized. I thought I was being supportive by trusting Bobby Joe completely and never questioning his word. What I discovered was that I'd actually been protecting myself and my family in ways I never even realized. Gestures toward the house. This house has seen 4 generations of strong women now. My great-grandmother, who bought it with her seamstress money. My grandmother, who raised 6 children here during the Depression. My mama, who kept it running while Daddy was overseas in World War II. And now me, who kept it safe when the man I trusted most in the world tried to take it away. The South has changed a lot since I was a young woman, sweetheart. When I got married in 1975, most women still expected to defer to their husbands on financial matters. But the women in my family taught me something important. Always keep your own counsel, always read every paper, and always remember that security comes from your own wisdom, not from depending on someone else's promises. Looks directly at the camera/listener. I'm not bitter anymore. Honey, anger will eat you alive if you let it. And I've got too much living left to do. I've got grandchildren to spoil, a garden to tend, and friends who depend on me. I volunteer at the hospital where I used to work. I've joined the Historical Society to help preserve houses like this one. And I've even started dating again. A lovely widower named Frank who lost his wife to cancer and knows what it means to value what you have. The truth is, Bobby Joe did me a favor in the end. He showed me that I was stronger and smarter than I'd ever given myself credit for. And he taught me that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is finding out who someone really is before it's too late to protect yourself. This old house has good bones, strong foundations, and roots that go deep, just like the women who've lived in it. And that's something no one can ever take away.